Hi, everyone. So good to see you tonight. For this icebreaker, we'll actually combine roll call and icebreaker, so say who you are and answer the question. More of a serious question tonight. Dun, dun, dun. I'm wondering about how you all are feeling about the comprehensive plan process so far. I'd love to hear your thoughts about how you think it's going, ways that we can improve, if any. And that's that. Sorry, it's not fun, per usual. Bruce, we'll start with you.
Bruce Ryu, and I think the process is going quite well. This is the first time I ever do this, and so it's a lot more involved than I anticipated. But very done. And city fathers over here have done a great job providing us with a lot of information about
This is really my first time doing anything for the city since I worked for the newspaper for so many years. And I'm just apologetic that I don't have more input. I just don't have the background that like people that have been through it 2 or 3 times have. So I enjoy the discussion of that.
I think the process is going fine. You know, it's long and involved, and lots of decisions still to be made before we can bring things broadly to the public, but I think the process has been going well.
What if I said something different? No. I think it's going along well. It's more complex perhaps than we had realized, particularly of those of you who haven't been immersed in this in the past. And it's perhaps a little more challenging. There's a lot of different aspects to it to try to pull together. We're probably a little bit behind this where I would like to be, but I think we might catch up and be pretty close to completing it near our goal of completing it this summer sometimes.
Yeah, I was going to touch on something like that. I think, you know, the process so far has been pretty good. I think the part that I'm getting nervous about myself is that seeing the timeline that we had talked about originally, I think that we're going to cram an awful lot into the next few months. You know, and we had some pretty good discussions back in, November, December, regarding policies and actions. And I think that we need to kind of flesh those out a little bit more as a committee and just have some more robust discussion about individual things rather than the ideas that we mostly talked about in November, December were individuals throwing out ideas, and those ended up the policies and actions. And I think we just need to kind of talk through some of those and decide what are the things that we actually want to do as a committee and have maybe some debate about what's the right path forward, because we're not going to do them all. I think there's just way too many ideas. But beyond that, I think, you know, we've had some good discussions, so looking forward to the rest of it.
Hi, Paul Jacques. I know one of our goals early on, like a year ago now, was to make sure as many people as possible were heard, and I think that's been, it was a struggle at first to get as many people involved, but I think it's getting more and more that way. Obviously, there's meetings going on without us to have different discussions, but they're getting relayed effectively by the team here. Thank you. And agreeing with Dana, I think just you go through like the policies and actions, then we've been on the map for a while, and then I think just the implications of those policies and actions, I think, come to light, and then you really need to go and revisit them again and say, well, this is what's going to be impacted by this, and it's coming out with as people get new ideas, and that's where the timeline thing gets a little worrisome with trying to hurry to keep up with the deadline or something, rather than saying, hey, we need a little. I'm not saying we need more time, but just making sure that we are thorough and not just getting it done on time.
Evening, Tim Cowan. Just to add to these comments, I I appreciate the discussions that the committee has been having. I think it's a really good working, we're working together well. And I really appreciate Barry Dunn and the Auburn staff. I think you're really responsive to ideas or concerns of time crunches and things like that. You know, you're being creative and innovative to find ways where, for example, we're not going to be breaking out into committees. We're going to be extending our meetings so this group can have deliberation. I'm sure that was feedback you heard, and I appreciate that you responded that way. But I'd also say that I'm very cognizant of the fact that we would not be where we are without the folks sitting over there and not up here, because you've done some tremendous work in getting input from the community and finding ways. So I think it's doing great.
Yeah, it's a complicated question to answer, actually. And I guess this is my first time doing anything remotely like this, and I've really been struck by how the first, 5 or 6 months was really about kind of broad vision and sort of trying to include as many people as possible, and that seemed to be really successful. And it felt, as a layperson, like I could really contribute. And then when we shift into the maps and the growth zones, it suddenly seemed to me, it's just, for me personally, without a background on the planning board, I suddenly felt like, whoa, I am really in over my head. I think I managed to speak even when I feel over my head, but that's really a challenge. And I think what that's about is not just knowing what happens with planning boards, but what's the connection between all of those things that we heard from people in the first part and what we're doing now and the decisions that we're making now. So maybe a couple of people mentioned this, that then at some point we have to cycle back and look at but it feels like, that's the question in my mind, is like, how is this manifesting what we heard from so many people in Auburn, and is it?
Hi, Matt Duval. I could echo a lot of what's already been said, so I'm not going to repeat it, but I think I've been very appreciative of the work that the staff and Barry done. I think it's been a great process, and I'm happy to see it continue.
Hi, Phil Kroll, City Manager. I think two areas that I think I would highlight of how it's been going in our process. One, our executive team meets weekly. It's a weekly pulse meeting that we have, and we have a scorecard. And on our scorecard is citizen engagement in the comp plan. And so we track those numbers weekly to see what engagement do we have. And we know by design, we're in a bit of a lull right now for engagement. But the fact that we hit our benchmarks, it exceeded our benchmarks, of 1,800, I think, somewhere in there of people engaged, tells me we're on the right track. We're in a bit of a lull that's going to gear back up again here soon. And that leads me to the other portion where sometimes I have to be reminded that process is important, because it's really easy for me to want to fast forward often and let's just get the end document. And so process is important, and I think that process will dictate the timeline and ensure that we get where we need to be. And I think, for a score, I think we're overall, I feel like we're a solid A on where we're at. I think we're hitting the pieces that we need to hit. We need some refining on some elements, but I think great feedback from this committee and the fact that we have, granted, it's a little low tonight, but for the most part, every committee we've had almost a full house here, other than a couple. So I think that just shows that people are committed and engaged.
Dennis Dote, Assistant City Manager. I'm not going to repeat a lot of what I heard. I think this has been a great process. I guess the only thing I would add is this is a large committee, and I think I'm most impressed with being so large, how functional it is, how much progress has been made, and it's just been really great conversations and good work up to this point. So I'd say keep up the good work.
Jonathan Labonte. I serve as the city's transportation director, which includes managing the city's freight intermodal facility as well as the Auburn-Lewiston Municipal Airport. This is my first meeting of your committee, so I can certainly give you more feedback later. But I will say, as a quote-unquote outsider, say with my role running the airport, Mayor Harmon was actively involved in our master plan update, which we've recently completed, and I can shed some light on that. But he was very much committed to making sure that, because the airport is in Auburn, and what the airport does and what happens in Auburn, they directly impact and can complement each other. That there's been really a focus on integrating, looking holistically at the city. And I think the makeup of this committee, having been involved in 2010 and in 2021, the level of elected official, planning board, and community engagement. So you're running the full spectrum of those who have to approve it, those who were stewarded at the planning board level. It's an impressive makeup. So kudos to the group.
Lauren Cafe, long-range planner. I have to do like a self-assessment right now. But I think it's going well. I just wanted to thank you all for your patience with me and your ideas that you share with me. I feel really lucky to be able to work with such a great committee and city staff and consultant team. So.
All right. Good evening, Kevin Price, principal with Barry Dunn. I think from our perspective, going well. I think a lot of that credits to this group for the sustained involvement and also just the collaboration along the way. We don't always see that. There are times that we're going through the process and we get to the end and it's like, okay, we didn't get quite as much engagement at every step along the way that we want to see in order for us to see these things get implemented later. So I think, while it's been a lot, I hear that from, a few kind of maybe more than expected. It's important, and I think it's setting the city up for more success after plan adoption.
Allie Toby with Barry Dunn. Not much else to add, just thankful for this group's investment in time and the public's investment in time in contributing to this process. I think that makes these as successful as possible, so thank you.
Good. Thank you all very much for those very insightful and supportive comments. We'll do all we can to continue on the good work we're doing. The next item on the agenda is roll call. See who's here. Bruce, would you start us off?
We did that with the.
Oh. Oh, okay, yes, we did, okay, sorry. My brain's about a half a second off, yeah. I'll just add, though, for folks that I did get some messages, Becky is completing a meeting in Portland. She told me that she has, but she will be here, but she'll be late. Rick is chairing the Auburn Public Library Board of Trustees, which I just came from. Reason why I was a little late. But Rick will be here after he completes that meeting. Belial was not feeling well this evening. And Dennis, I don't know what state he is in. He's out west, but he's watching the Celtics play basketball live. So I'm envious. So that's what I have for the others that contacted me. So that's the minutes. Are there any additions, corrections, changes to the minutes that anybody wants to know?
Motion to approve.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion about the minutes? If not, all those in favor of adopting the minutes, raise your hand. Thank you very much. We're at the point in our agenda where we always allow an opportunity for any public member who would like to address us about the comprehensive plan or perhaps provide us information or comments to have a chance to speak. So if there's anyone in the audience who would like to address the comprehensive plan committee, please come up to the podium, give us your name and address, and let us know your thoughts.
Hello, good evening. First of all, do I have 3 minutes or 5 minutes?
Let me check for a second, I'll tell you. Are there other speakers who want to speak tonight? two others, okay. So we allow and total about 15 minutes. So
Okay.
it looks like we divide it 3 ways. That would be up to 5 minutes for each one.
All right, well, I'll try and split the difference. I'm Chelsea Eaton. I'm on Trapp Road in Auburn. First of all, I'd like to thank Paul for his comment during roll call about taking your time during this process of developing this comp plan. I understand that there are deadlines and timelines and everybody's very busy, but I just appreciated that thought in if you have to make a decision between meeting a deadline and continuing discussion on something, as a citizen of Auburn, as we all are, I would like to see this committee have more discussion. So I just wanted to say thank you for that comment. And thank you all for being here. I think this is a tremendous group of people. I think the people on this committee are fantastic, and I think it's a great group of people. The primary thing I'd like to comment on, and admittedly, I don't know much about it, but I have heard discussion of this extension potential of water and sewer. There's some sort of funding that may become available, or there's some speculation on extending this water and sewer to various areas. And my understanding is that based on the state laws, if an area has this water and sewer, you have to allow this high density, I believe it's four units per 10,000, whatever. You guys know it, I don't know it. Just think about if you change this red map, which I understand this map is not about changing zoning, but for the sake of discussion, let's say it is because you kind of are. If you put something in red now because it might have this potential for this utilities expansion, which my understanding is that there's no clear plan or clear timeline on that. And so if you're thinking about changing areas of this map now to potentially red based on this speculation of maybe there's going to be water and sewer there at some point, I would really question that because, first of all, that may never happen, or it might not happen for years, potentially to the next comp plan. So don't change something now based on something that doesn't have a clear plan or a clear timeline. Furthermore, I would like to see, if we're talking about these high development areas that are going to be served by water and sewer, what is basically a cost-benefit analysis, because as that expands out and out and out, does in the long term that really serve the city in that wouldn't it become a cost burden to have that development keep going out and out, just because you have the potential to expand this water and sewer? Maybe or maybe not that it's a good idea, depending on the area. So I would just think really long term about these areas that are going red. And when you talk about the ag zone, this is just a quick comment. When you talk about the ag zone, which we all call it the ag zone, it's the ag zone. I call it the ag zone. But just remember, it's the agriculture and resource protection zone. So open space is a resource. Woodlots are a resource. It's not just about agriculture. What we think of agriculture is cows and corn being grown. Open space is a resource too, and woodlots are a resource. Dark skies are a resource. Auburn has incredible open space and recreational opportunities. And I'm not arguing, we need housing, there's no question. But like I said, this is an excellent group of people, and I believe that this group can come up with some incredibly innovative ideas that nobody else is doing and create a balance of intelligent, highly functional, highly beneficial housing and balancing our incredible open space that we have in the north and south ends of Auburn. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Chelsea. Casey, you'll hear us talk about many of the things that you discuss, so you'll see that interaction going on. For those who may not be aware, the city was just recently awarded, I think, about $8 million for water and sewer line extension in the area of South Main and Vickery Road, maybe Broad Street, depending how far the money goes. That doesn't cover the whole red area, for sure. But the city was fortunate enough to get some money to get it started. The second speaker.
Good evening. My name is Kathy Shaw. I own and operate, or am owned and operated by Valley View Farm. A lot of what Chelsea said, I'm going to agree with. I attended a meeting early last week and was really alarmed at the size of the red zone. We can't go back when those zones are changed. People will begin to look for development. This week alone, I have had 3 calls for people interested in developing the land that I own. Not farming, developing. That's what they want. And so if you increase these red zones or accept these red zones, all of the people that are currently landowners in these areas are going to be hit with more and more requests. So I would really ask you to cherish our resources. Somebody told me the other day, off the Turnpike exit, well, those are just hay fields. They can be developed. Hay is a commodity as well in our city that is very valuable and utilized by a lot of farmers. So I don't want a hay field to be dismissed as it's okay for development. My final thought is, you folks all are putting an immense amount of thought and effort into this comprehensive plan. I really appreciate the time that you've spent. I know there are no easy answers, but please know that folks are listening and they are paying attention and are looking forward to thoughtful progress for the city of Auburn. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy, for your comments, and if you're able to stay for a while this evening, you'll hear a lot of comments about growth zones and coming up this evening. Third speaker.
Stephen Beal, 575 Johnson Road. This process involves a lot of time spent looking at, studying, and evaluating maps. I would like to encourage the people of this committee to do something further than looking at maps and comparing and evaluating what's represented on them. The best way to get a sense of what the community is like, and this is a very large community geographically, is to go look at it. And I would encourage all of you, before you get much further in this process, to drive around this city, take an afternoon, and go to various parts of the city that you may well never have been to before. There are a lot of people in this city who've never been to East Auburn and recognize that was an entirely separate community at one point, before it was coordinated with the rest of Auburn by Center Street. There are a lot of folks here who probably don't know that there was once a West Danville village. Some of you may remember it because West Danville was the home of the Auburn Drive-In Theater, if any of you remember that. But there's a whole separate residential area out there that's different from the other part of Danville, which is a clustered village at the base of a steep hill surrounded by the hill on one side and railroad tracks at the junction on the other. So I urge you to take that kind of a drive, get the sense of where the open spaces are valuable open spaces, where they may look open on a map, but are really a bunch of swamp if you drive through it, or are heavily encumbered with ledge, because that will do a lot to inform your discussions and decision-making about the kinds of uses that are going to be best suited for this land area in the future. And there are a lot of geographic area and a lot of different kinds of topography and soil types, and I urge you to take a look at all of them. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Beal. I'll just check. Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, we'll close the public session. The next item on the agenda is policy and actions update. Lauren is going to give us an update on the next steps in regards to further refining the policies and actions section.
Thank you, John. So next week, members of the project team and various representatives from city committees and boards will meet to look over the city staff comments that were received end of December to attempt to further refine the policies and actions to make them strategic and measurable and implementable. You all received an email from me inviting you to those meetings. They'll be held in the conference room on the second floor. And each day next week, there'll be a different goal that we'll be working on. And we'll then come back to the committee end of March. So our March 24th meeting will be dedicated to reviewing the policies and actions. You'll see the versions and change over time from our November and December meetings to the city staff review to then this further refinement that's occurring. And we'll have a chance to comment and go line by line and make sure that the first 6 months of this process aligns with now the second half of this process. John, did you have anything else to add to that process?
No, I think it's consistent with comments that I heard you made earlier, which is that we want to be careful in taking these next steps. Policies and actions are going to be the things going forward that future policymakers and administration will be looking at in regards to implementing the plan. We want to make it as useful and usable as possible. And I think by sharpening a little bit expectations and objectives and outcomes that may be a bit more measurable will help make the plan more useful and also be clearer in the process going forward. So that's what we hope to achieve. Daniel?
I was just wondering if any of us come to those meetings, what would our role be at them?
It's a great question. I think primarily to ask questions if you have any and just kind of view the process from how city staff are looking at the documents, how they're integrating previous city plans with the current policies and actions that the committee has produced. And so I would say a participant in the questions, and if you have comments or things that you want to bring in from the process that you see haven't been included, that would be helpful as well.
Yeah, I might add, we tried to invite committees with some jurisdiction in the subject area, transportation, for example, natural resources, to get their input as well, members of the administrative staff to help us clarify it, and other members of the committees who have worked on some of this as well. So we're trying to get a broader sense of input. This will also then have an opportunity to have further comments to larger committees of interest within this area to get more feedback. And of course, there'll be a public opportunity for feedback as well. And also, ultimately, it all comes back here because this process has to be approved by us. So you'll be seeing it all again, but a little more refined. Any other questions about the process? It'll be busy next week or so going forward, and I'll just note, you'll notice on the agenda at the bottom, because I think it's been mentioned about schedules and timelines. That's been on our minds as well, hence why we've scheduled a number of these meetings. and also scheduled an extra comprehensive plan board meeting this month. So we'd look to meet on the 19th and on the 24th. Try to keep us on schedule as best as we can. As well, of course, we've expanded our time of meetings as well, so we'll have more time to work. If there are no other questions in regards to policies and actions, we have a overview of the changes to the growth areas and maps from our last meeting. I believe Barry Dunn will walk us through those changes. They were noted in your packet where the changes were, so they were delineated there as well. And here's an opportunity, once again, for everyone, including the public, to see where we are as of tonight.
Mr. Chair, if I may, Ally, could you, is it easy to highlight kind of the water sewer currently, to get a sense, help me visually remind me of what's already kind of required in the red zone versus what's not yet have that?
So the area here shown in purple are all parcels within 200 feet of sewer lines that have water line access as well.
Thank you.
Do you want me to turn the red on over top of that?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Somewhat hard to
Perfect,
see.
thank you.
So looking at changes from January to February, I'll start up here. Updates were made to turn on the watershed. Follow parcel boundaries in areas in the lake watershed. So this blue area here is the watershed. Extended the low growth or the green boundary to the edge of parcel lines, with the exception of the Central Maine Community College lot. So these all have been updated to reflect that for the high growth, high density area. Another change made here to remove areas that were split in the Taylor Pond watershed area to follow Hotel Road and Stevens Mill Road as a cutoff here. So these were changed from red to yellow. This area here was reverted back to its original split here from red. There was this frontage here along Washington Street and over along Moose Brook Road here was updated from green to the red area, and then these industrial parcels here were updated to yellow. The floating green area here was updated to yellow, and then this handful of parcels over here was updated from green to yellow.
You might make a note, Elliot, along that's Route 136 near the river. It looks a little funky when you first look at it, but I think that the reason that is that the way it's cut, that's showing some floodplain area near the river.
Right here?
No, a little further on, it just, you see where it seems to be larger and smaller in certain particular areas, and this.
There's some boundary line adjustments that we need to make to reconcile some of the flood areas with the ag zone boundaries. So there's a couple of areas in here, just line-wise, that we're gonna go through and clean up.
Yep. First quick looks a little funny, but there's a reason for it.
Yes. I believe as far as updates go, that covers the updates that were made coming out of the last meeting.
We'll add that in our previous meeting, that little floating parcel of ag that's south of 295 that went from green to yellow. We discussed having further study on those parcels, and so I'd actually hold off on having that in yellow until further, because it's going from green to yellow, and we didn't decide as a committee quite yet. And I didn't present materials on current use of those parcels, and so for the time being, we'll say that's hashed and will be further reviewed at the next meeting.
Would it be possible those areas that are still pending or under question to have kind of a hash mark on those? Maybe, you know, use two colors, one of where it was and one where you might be thinking you should go. That'll help us pick it up so remember what it is.
Yes, we can do that.
Are there any questions or are there changes that you're remembering that are different than what you've seen here? Or does that look pretty consistent with what we did? Okay. Dana,
I guess I just want to say I'm still not completely sold on changing. I don't know the name of the road here. The area right north of Moore and Brickyard, from ag zone to high density. The pieces on Washington Street, I don't know, but that one piece that's just north of it, right there, that one. I don't know. I'm not sold on it. I'm not sure what the purpose in changing it to high density is.
Okay. I'm going to put that down as a note so we talk about it tonight. Do that.
Just to follow up on that, is that one large parcel, the parcel, Dana, that you were just talking about? Does it go all the way out to 202?
Jeff, you have?
Yeah, that's one large parcel. That island that you see in the middle of it, move your cursor right there, that's owned by the Maine Turnpike Authority, because that's where Route 4 and 100 was. Route 100 used to bisect this parcel, and then when DOT did the safety upgrades and made it straight, that's the abandoned piece in the middle of that.
Thanks.
So what I thought, sort of segue into the next section here, that is further work on boundaries of the three growth areas. I think there might be, well, let me rephrase that. I think there's some areas that are likely that you want some further discussion on, which is going to be the opportunity to do that this evening. I think also there are some that might be somewhat more minor or housekeeping kind of things that might be easy to have a consensus on. And then there's others that I think there's going to be more discussion, like Dana's question that he brought up. So my thought was perhaps if there are those of you who have minor changes that you want to, align with the property line or something like that, maybe we could try to address those first and resolve them quickly, and then that will leave us a good chunk of time to talk about those that might take more conversation. Does that sound like a good approach to do? Okay. Well, why don't I also, but while I'm there, let me ask now, what areas that have, I'm sorry, let me start again. What areas do any of you feel require some further discussion that was discussed last time? Dana made a suggestion of an area you thought required a little more thought and discussion. Are there some of those bigger ones that I just want to make sure that I don't miss them this evening if you want to talk about them. Paul?
Just in that same area where Dana was talking about, just that whole southeast side of the 202.
Southeast side, yeah.
That, I'm pretty sure it was green before, where the solar panels went in, that side. I don't see why it's necessary to put that as red. That's pretty good land to maintain.
Okay. I'll make a note of that. Any, Bruce?
I have a question, John. When we change a parcel from, I know when we change it from green to anything else, we change the tax status of it. Do we not?
Not necessarily, but I can see why that would come to, why one would easily come to that conclusion.
So by changing any of these parcels,
Mhm.
are we changing the tax status of that parcel?
It will depend on ultimately what the zoning is. Much of the green would be agricultural resource protection, I suspect. But there may be portions of it where it might not be completely ag and resource protection. There might be some rural residential, for example, which is a very low development area. There's some out there now. So it would depend ultimately where that is, and part of that is going to be driven on another piece of our work, which is going to be the land use categories that help describe what the uses of those lots might look like, and that would be for the whole city. So even though if it's red, let's say, we're not talking about 7-story high-rises throughout the entire red area. There'll be different environmentally built areas where we'll describe it differently depending on what is the built environment and what we expect it to be. So, not a direct answer, but it's a good question. And some of that, I think, for example, the farm in West Hardscrabble, which was stated here, it was contingent upon it getting, it's contingent of changing that, subject to whether Title VII in the state statute would provide a lower tax value because it's used for an agricultural purpose. And we don't have all of the information on that. So part of that is contingent on whether or not that would apply and affect the tax situation if they still continue farming it. Laura?
Just a process question as we look at the agenda. What might be helpful is if we move to agenda item 7 and discuss any remaining comments regarding the high-growth, high-density areas, which is what I think you were getting to, just so that we're aligned with, we're on agenda item 7. And then we have comments for the airport and the SNRB as well.
Well, yes, that's exactly where I was going. But I just want to miss anything here. It's on my list. Jane?
Your question about whether I still have concerns about some of the red areas, I find myself kind of unclear about what happens. I mean, this is why I have a hard time answering that question. So when we're talking about land use categories, which seems to me incredibly important, like I want to be able to talk about those before kind of answering your question. Will we be talking about those land use categories? At what scale will we be talking about them? So are they in terms of neighborhoods or what's existing zoned areas? Or because that to me makes a difference in terms of whether I think it's appropriate or inappropriate to have something one color or another. If I think that there are land use category rules that, sort of fine tune it, But, so I guess I just, at this point, have a question that would help me think
Yeah.
forward. Like, what's the scale at which we're going to be talking about land use categories?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jane. I'm going to allow Ally and Lauren to comment on that.
So when we're thinking about land use categories, there's a couple of ways to approach this, and the scale is going to vary kind of depending on what we're talking about, because the size of the downtown might be very different from some of the more rural types of uses that are going to happen across a broader land category. So typically when we're looking at these, we're talking about kind of broader general categories that might encompass a couple of zoning districts that exist today. Generally, the thought is that we're capturing kind of a broad vision for what that area could and should look like in the future. And that might be kind of areas for natural resource protection, higher density areas like the downtown, more dense mixed use neighborhoods, kind of thinking about it more in type of kind of place than kind of specific zoning boundaries as they are today, because this will inform future zoning updates. So there may be some areas that are combined or incompatible with kind of what comes out of this comp plan.
So just to give some concrete example of what it may be like, is that the description may include things about the height of the buildings?
General height.
Generally the height?
So general form, kind of what does it look like? What does it feel like? Are there 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-story buildings? Is it largely single-family homes? Is this an area in the like Auburn watershed that's its own land use category where the goal is to really restrict development to protect water quality and things like that? So general, in the cheat sheet that we passed around, kind of general density, we're not going to get into like units per acre calculation, setback decisions as part of this process, but kind of general form and scale and sizing for each of those areas.
In types of uses potentially?
Types of uses,
yeah.
Whether that's houses, businesses, open space, natural resources, and then maybe some other relevant quality of life items, whether that's kind of transportation, pedestrian access, parks, open space protection, those types of things as well.
Not quite the same thing, but a cousin of it, is that there are other land use protection aspects that exist today and will continue to exist. So the shoreline zoning regulations that regard streams and rivers and ponds, wetlands, all of those kinds of things, regardless of what growth area they're in, it's still required that they be protected, and that will be included in the description with the expectation going forward that there'll be those protections there. I'll just use that as one example, but there are others, wildlife habitat areas, for example, conservation areas in the city. So those things will still be tools that will be part of the future land use going forward, but it will be within the different growth areas that they will be applied. Hopefully that helped a little bit. Oh, excuse me.
Thanks. If there's time, is getting some detail or thought, input on, we have this $8 million that was awarded for, are there current plans on where that would go? Could you remind me the approximate mileage we're talking, that kind of stuff? I don't know if that fits into the schedule, if that's for another time, but as we're thinking about the growth zone, that would help me as well.
Yeah, I actually think that's a good place to start this, because I think, especially from the public comment, there's a lot of misinformation running around, and there's a lot of misunderstanding about what's happening here with these growth zones. So I think the first thing people need to understand is, while what's in front of the committee today that's in red isn't areas that have always, I guess since 2010 at least, been in the growth zone, almost all of this is. So in a general sense, this growth zone that's in red that's up here now is smaller than what the growth zone has been for the last 16 years, because a large section of what was previously in the growth zone south of the turnpike has been removed from the growth zone. So there's a few things to say about that. South of the turnpike's been removed from the growth zone. North of the turnpike, where the yellow is, I think Ally showed this before, is an area that currently doesn't have water and sewer, but it is an area that's planned for water and sewer. And this, I think, goes to Tim's comment. So the city has received $8 million to do water and sewer expansion. The target area for that has been for a number of years now, South Main, Vickery, Broad Street out to Hackett to connect to the network on Washington Street. $8 million isn't going to do all that. The city's looking at this further, but there's really two potentials. It's either South Main and Vickery, or it's Broad Street. We know you can't do the whole project on Broad Street, but it's going to be one or the other, and that's to be determined, but it's all within this area. The only other area that's in the red that doesn't currently have water and sewer is the area south of the Washington Street pumping station, which is the piece down here below the turnpike exit on both sides of the road. All the rest of this red, those two areas, each side of Washington Street was not in the growth zone prior, has been added. I think there's this misconception that somehow all of a sudden the committee is recommending some giant growth zone. The growth zone's actually smaller than it was before, and a lot of this is going to be driven by state statute. So where we have water and sewer, whether we put it in the growth zone or not, you're going to have the same growth, because the state law has the same or substantially similar requirements about lot sizes and the number of dwellings and all this that you can put on them. So I think, Tim, to answer your question, I think we're in the same place. We can talk about this further, but we've talked about this at numerous meetings, that the area north of 95 where water and sewer is planned been added to the growth zone, was in the growth zone, and we maintained it in the growth zone when we dropped the growth zone where all that yellow is south of the turnpike.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Okay. Yes, please. Yeah, please.
No, I like that explanation, Jeff. Thanks. Also, it will be incomplete with the amount of money that's been given, but it could kickstart developers to add on to it and continue it along, saying this is going to happen and it can happen, and just keep the ball rolling around those corridors that it makes a lot of sense to keep doing.
Okay.
John?
Yeah.
Yeah, if I follow up on that a little bit, I think another way to think about this is that the city, if you're looking at this broadly from a city perspective, the city has a number of priority and competing, priorities that we want to accomplish. So, certainly one of them is protection of open space in the ag zone and inhibiting sprawl. On the other hand, we have priorities around economic development. We have priorities around providing housing. And so I think the way I look at this is, in order to balance those priorities out, we've eliminated the growth zone south of the turnpike, but we kept what doesn't have water, sewer above it. And we can have further discussions, I think we will, about Washington Street. But what people need to think about is if it's not in the area that's red right now, where are you suggesting we put it? Because we cannot meet, the city will not be able to meet certain priorities that they have around housing and economic development if we start significantly shrinking what the growth zone is today. So that would be my challenge to folks is I'm happy to have a discussion about any part of this that's in red that's a growth zone, but the discussion shouldn't be, I just don't like it in red, let's eliminate it. It needs to be, I don't like it in red, and this is where I want something that's in yellow or green to be red, so that across the board we can try to balance out a number of competing priorities.
And that's a pretty good overview, Tim.
The other thing that, this is your comment, and it's helpful to be thinking, I'm particularly excited about the Washington Street corridor and what is currently being talked about, and we're getting some good feedback. And the Broad Street potential is somewhat, in my mind, is tied into that. And so I think that's, and it naturally, it's kind of the most proximal to even further northwest in the growth zone. So I just, I think it's a natural progression, and a great, it can add into a natural flow. So to me, that makes sense to definitely keep that in, if that ends up being where we initially invest in the $8 million to, as you said, Paul, to get things moving. So.
Okay.
Yeah, just a quick response to your comment, Jeff. I mean, I completely agree with you, and I think part of why I'm impatient to get to the land use category stuff is that I would just love for us, and one of the things that we talked about at the Sustainability and Natural Resource Board last week was how can we imagine development in that Broad Street to South Main area and doing it in such a way that we preserve some open space for trails, and we've got a fabulous opportunity here. So, but as I understand it, that will be the next stage. So I'm kind of like chafing at the bit a little bit, because I think that's the way to respond to some of the concerns that we heard earlier, but we haven't gotten there yet, I guess.
So let me assuage maybe some anxiety. Well, anyway, anxiety, because Jane, you make a good point, is we don't know all the pieces yet. So not that I'm suggesting that we continue to have the same discussions, because that wouldn't be useful. But as we go through the process, you're going to see these other pieces. And as you see these other pieces, the future land use map is not done until you say it's done. When we say we're ready to present this to the city council as part of our report. So there will be more opportunities, at least as far as I'm concerned, if once we move along, we want to tweak things a little more as we understand it, there will be an opportunity to go back and say, oh, we should tweak this a little bit because now I see what the land use categories are. We need different land use categories to meet that. So I just want you to know that I'm not asking you to marry me tonight. Well, I'm still courting you, okay? And we're courting the public. You don't have to make a final decision until we've gotten all the pieces together. And we'll go back and you'll have a chance to do that. Yeah.
Back to your earlier question here about some areas that I think people have talked about that require some additional substantive discussion.
So I was getting right there.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Okay. So I'm happen to be aware that Jeff, because Jeff makes sure that we all know what he's thinking, that we go do that. And I was thinking we might start in the northern part with those little yellow pieces that seem to be hanging out there in a sea of green, and then we could work through that. Does that work for you?
Yeah, I don't know what everybody else has. I've got a whole list of these cleanup things that I looked at since the last meeting and I provided to staff. I'm happy to go through those. I think most of them, as you pointed out earlier, are things that need to be cleaned up. They're not really substantive, and we can just skip the major substantive ones and then talk about those after.
Yes, I would appreciate that.
So the first one is up between North River Road and Center Street. There's up higher, you're going the wrong way. Where the two yellow blocks are, zoom in there. So that yellow right there is an orphaned area that was an artifact of the GIS left over from some zoning. There's no actual roads or driveways to that. The right-hand side of those lots are currently in low growth and they're ag, so I would propose that the back sides of those lots should also be green. You know, I'll keep going. Somebody jump in if they want me to stop.
I will say, Jeff, when you make an edit proposal, I would like the committee to say like yes or no or sign off, thumbs up. Yeah. Yes.
I'm feeling like I'm in the Coliseum.
Lauren's my adapt. I can see what's happened here is that Lauren has become part of the AI system, and she's put her new controls into mine. So
the next one is right there at the
we'll
bottom.
We'll go thumbs up.
Those are actually residential house lots. Everything above that's in low today, and it's all being used for ag. So I would propose that, for continuity with what we've done elsewhere, that those two small house lots would be yellow.
Closer out.
Everybody sort of see where that's located. Right there.
Talking the two green, turn them to yellow.
Yeah, I go from green to yellow. They're actually not any different than what's in red below them from their characteristics, and that would just be a transition going up into what's actually now above that use for agricultural purposes.
Thumbs up? Okay.
The next one I think John mentioned earlier, if you go over to the other side on West Hardscrabble Road, I think we need a placeholder here to more accurately reflect our prior discussions. So that lot, and then if you cross the street below it, the lot on the other side of the road and the little small triangular lot, I think somehow we need to make this like red and green hashes or something, because this is where we talked about I think where we came was that it could be red if there was a consensus around Title VII protections, and if that isn't going to work, we should maintain it in its current state of green.
So I think Tim, you're good with the thumbs there. So make that a hash mark of red and green?
This one, and then the former floating kind of green parcels where there was some more research into, we'll update both of those to be hatched areas.
Yeah, it's three lots there.
Is this the current industrial zone? Is that what that is?
An RB.
No, it's currently they're green, but they're, I think what happened in 2010 is because that's where the dairy farm is, they changed it. I think we need to provide that protection, but you know, this thing could last for 15 years, and from a planning perspective, if we can get the Title VII protection to protect the dairy farm, then it would make sense for it to be red.
I'm gonna ask Jonathan, because he's there all the time. This is the parcel that's just behind where the CMP stores are telephone poles?
Yeah, you've got the Rangeley branch owned by the Lewis and Auburn Railroad, and then the Field Dairy Farm is on the other side.
Yeah, and the one right to the left of it is the Bark Place.
What I was whispering to Jane was about our SNRB meeting last Tuesday, and I want to bring up a comment that was made during this time about this area. There was concern from that group about having this, what's currently green, as Jeff mentioned, being turned into red as a potential growth area, given the recreational access along the Little Androscoggin and other natural environment open space concerns. So I just wanted to relay those comments from them. And so in there, I guess what they would prefer was that this area stayed green regardless if there was Title VII provisions for the dairy farm. Jane, did I relay that correctly? Okay.
So we want to make that in striped area, red and green for the time being?
Just to make sure I'm truly following, it's very late for me tonight. My head is pretty much dead. But I think what the comment was that if in the case that the farm went inactive as a farm, the recommendation from the SNRB would to say this is an opportunity to use that as a recreational space, and that's why we keep it green?
Correct, yeah.
Gotcha, thank you.
So I think this is a one where it's a good hash and it'll be further discussed.
Okay, thumbs up? Okay.
The next one is a follow-on from a prior discussion we had on Fletcher Road. We had, at one point, that was yellow. We had then said that didn't make sense with the floodplain, but we need to fix this because we either need, it doesn't matter to me which way it goes. The yellow either needs to be a strip zone distance all along Fletcher Road with a piece towards the river green, or the demarcation between the green and the yellow needs to be the floodplain boundary, right? Because what we've got now doesn't do either of those things. So it's just something that needs to be cleaned up there.
So how would that change, Jeff? The green would expand?
Well, I think it's appropriate. So there's two ways to do it. So what Ally has up there now is the floodplain. So one way to do this would be to have the demarcation between the green and the yellow follow the floodplain boundary. The other way to do it would be just to use the strip zone distance from the road to be the demarcation. We could do it either way, but right now we have half of this separating the yellow from the floodplain, and the other part of the road we didn't.
Jeff, can you explain what you mean by strip zone demarcation?
Yeah, so I don't remember. Someone else will remember what this is. It's been on the planning board, but it's some distance, 250 or 400 feet or something, are strip zone distances, and you could just use the same thing, and in other words, you just follow the road and draw the line, or you could draw the line. But we need to be consistent here, because if you go back to the other view, you know, partway down the road, we're splitting off the area beside the river, and then the other part we're not.
What Jeff's talking about is the, if you look at the Trap Road and Pownell Road, those two areas down in South Auburn are strip zoned, and I think that's the same distance Jeff's talking about here.
Yep, that'd be a good example, Dana.
I'll ask Mr. Beal, who tracks these things as a concerned citizen. He knows what your thought is on what this depth is for a strip zone.
Typical strip zone has been 450 feet. There was an attempt to expand that 4 years ago to 750 feet. That attempt was rejected by the planning board, and it remains at 450. There's been some discussion about eliminating strips entirely a couple of times in the last 5 years.
So I don't think it matters for tonight to figure out which it should be. I think the point is it needs to be conformed, and the staff can look at this and say, hey, which one of these makes more sense to accomplish what we're trying to do here.
Well,
adding on to that, lot of people don't like strip zones. It's nice to continue it all the way back to the back of the lot. However, Auburn has these ridiculously long lots, and that's where that 700 feet or whatever it was to expand them was cutting generally way into the ag zones. It looks like here it would make sense just to go to the edge of the river, and the limiting factors be you can't build back there anyway. But it could impact the number of units you put on the front of the lot, hence the strip zone protecting some integrity of the neighborhood.
My preference would be to go with the zone you have up right there that follows the river, as opposed to a strip zone. Just a helpful visual reminder that there's a river there for me.
So would it be useful to have staff take a look at both options, see what it actually looks like, and we'll look at that the next time and make our choice?
Yeah, I mean, I think looking at it here, where we're right next to the Little Androscoggin, I think what would make sense to me is to, if we wanted to limit development near the watershed of the Little Androscoggin, to make the line that, what's the watershed?
This is the FEMA floodplain.
So what it is currently?
Uh,
What, the pink? What are we looking at? What color?
the orange and the green represent kind of different year flood marks.
And the current green distinction right now is just slightly inaccurate. It doesn't really follow either the split zones that we've been talking about or the FEMA floodplain from Little Androscoggin.
The green they just put up is the problem, right? It's not consistent along that area. We just need to find a solution for that.
So again, I'll ask, shall we ask staff to give us a view of both of those, and then next meeting we can finalize it? That sound good? Thumbs up? All right.
So the next area that I saw was along Lake Street out by the Colonial condominiums. And there's an inconsistency here. Yeah, right there, zoom in further. So I think it isn't clear to me. So the yellow on the south side of the street and the lots along the north side of the street, if sewer runs across there, would be red, like they are every place else. We have to remember, in our actual GIS map, it doesn't show every place sewer runs. So we just need to review this with the sewer district and make this consistent if sewer does run from the edge of the red on Lake Street out to where the condos end. But it is possible, since there's a connector over the Hotel Road from the back side of those condominiums, that sewer doesn't run there, and that this would be correct. So we just need to validate that, and if sewer runs that length of that piece of Lake Street, we just need to apply the 200-foot rule like we did every place else.
So the task would be to confirm where that, if and where that sewer line is. To do that for the next meeting? Everybody okay? Thumbs up? All right.
So that was the border when I went all the way around the circle on the red. So now I have a few that are more out in the green and yellow area. So the first one is way up on the Turner line, actually up by Mr. Beal's woodlot. There's these three pieces of yellow here that got, in effect, they're there because of the watershed boundary. There's no other yellow anywhere, and around that, it's not really a transition zone. I would recommend we just make those three areas green, and we deal with that when we get to the land use categories.
Yeah, obviously there is, in some of those areas, there's some development, so once we know what the land use category is, which would be a lower growth, we can apply it to those areas. So the question is, shall we make those 3 yellows green? And then take a look at what the land use category would be for those.
If we looked at the land use categories, would there be a potential of putting them back into yellow?
Well, sure, but I think the thing you need to think about with land use categories is it's a continuum, right? So, you know, the least restrictive green is probably not much different than the most restrictive yellow. And yeah, if we're looking at this and say whatever we do with green land use categories just won't fit here, we could switch them back, but I'm presuming that won't be the case.
Good way to go? Thumbs up? Okay. Oh,
It's fine.
did I?
I don't have an argument either way yet, so.
Did I miss you? I didn't mean to.
Oh, I went like this.
Oh, okay. Oh, you went,
No.
oh, I see. All right.
So just running,
Half and half.
I'm just not done thinking about it.
Okay.
so running through my list, this next one is off Lost Valley Road, where Lost Valley is, and if people think this is a more substantive discussion, we can just defer this to the substantive discussion. We have this in green today, so if you move your cursor a little to the left, no, not quite to the road, that's Lost Valley Road right there. And those lots on each side, as you'll see, mostly are not in the Lake Auburn watershed, right? Just, the dark green's the watershed. So there's a little piece of each of that parcel that's in the watershed. These other 2 parcels are not in the Lake Auburn watershed. And I would propose that the yellow be extended, not including the watershed, across those 2 lots, given the nature of the activity that's there and the future potential.
I think that's fine. I think when Jonathan was the mayor, I think we put some things in that allowed for higher level development next to recreational areas like golf courses in this area. So I think it's a moot point, but I think it's a good idea.
Everybody clear on the area that Jeff is referring to?
So the lots, I'm not sure I am, but these 2 lots, am I looking at this correctly, Ally, that they have the front portion closest to the road in yellow?
They do.
Yeah, it's a strip zone in the front that's yellow, the front portion of those lots, but the back's in the green today.
Everybody thumbs up?
So just to confirm, extending the yellow to these 2 parcels here with the exception of the watershed boundary piece.
Correct.
The 2 big parcels, what about that 3rd small one that's right below your arrow, beneath it?
Well,
One just to the left of it.
that's a strip zone today, and it's obscured. If you take off the watershed, you'll see the strip zone continues there. So
No, not the one where the watershed overlaps, the one just to the west of it, just to the left on the map. Isn't that a small lot? Keep going over to your right. A little bit more. Bingo, that one right there.
Yep, those are in the, there's a strip zone in the front, and that strip zone continues.
All right, were you proposing, that was not one of the 2 zones you just talked about, right?
No.
I'm just suggesting make that yellow too.
No, it would be just to the left of that, and then the one that the road is on.
Yep. So I'm suggesting adding in that 3rd is a 3rd lot over there that's fully yellow. you have the two big ones. And then the one just to the, where that arrow is the strip zone, at the back of the lot. Should we make that yellow as well?
What's your thought on doing it that way?
Well, just, we've been doing that across a lot of the map, and to me, it's a consistency issue. Just making the full lot
I
yellow.
understand your point. I guess my thought about that would be that this is a strip zone, and if we're going to extend that to the back, Ally, if you take off the Lake Auburn watershed,
So that should all be.
right? So it hits that boundary. If you're going to do that, I would say you would want what's not in the Lake Auburn watershed, the lot you're pointing to, and the ones further down, you should apply the same principle.
This one and this one.
So you're-
I'll make a proposal that we, please, if you could show us a visual where it encompasses the entire plots for all the way down for consistency. It just, we've been doing that in other areas. It just makes sense to me to do that here too.
Yeah, except where the watershed is.
Except where the watershed is, yes.
There's an additional lot that's owned by, if you go north, Alley, sorry, that's owned by Lost Valley, which is, if you click the large, it's just west of the brook. So go a little bit more to the left. Nope, just, you're good. Stop
Oh, sorry,
moving.
I'm
Move
facing
your
the wrong way.
mouse. You zoom up a little bit. Go up. Nope, just move your mouse over to the left. Left, left,
Oh, sorry, I'm facing you the wrong way.
left, left, left. Keep going. Stop. That one is also owned by Lost Valley. And so I wonder if that should also be yellow.
That little rectangular, triangular shaped thing right there?
Yes.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. If it's owned by Lost Valley and it's outside the watershed, I didn't know they owned that third one, or I would have included it.
Thumbs up to including all parcels owned by Lost Valley into yellow. Okay.
Good.
And then exploring.
We can show that as a
Options.
hatched option,
Okay.
consistent with the other areas for review.
Yeah, that would be a good idea.
Okay, the next one is, if you go back down to the road there, is, it's over by, it's actually a city lot, but it's next to where Whiting Farm is, so right there, whoops, zoom in, move your cursor to the right, keep going, keep going, keep going, more, that lot. So the issue is, if you look at the yellow here, that big lot is yellow on the bottom. That has very, very significant conservation easements on it. You can't even walk across that lot. The only thing that's allowed there, it was an existing snowmobile trail. So I would propose that we clean this up, and that lot and the little sliver of the one next to it, to the right of it, no, to the right, that lot and the city lot, that yellow be turned to green, and that the back parts of those lots off Lake Street be turned to yellow, right in there, so that we can form this all up to the lot lines. It'll be a lot less confusing.
Nope, I'm sorry.
So the next one, I have a couple observations. This is on Perkins Ridge Road at the end of the strip zone right here. So this is a little weird. If you look at this, the strip zone comes down and it makes this funny triangle across these two lots. And it would seem we could do one or two things. We could just square this up with a lot line of the lot that it ends on, right? Because this is weird. The front part of the lot's in the green, the back part of the lot's in the green, and the middle is yellow. So we could square that up. And the other thing we could think about is extending this strip zone all on that side of the road all the way down to where it meets the yellow. I'm not particularly advocating for that, but when I looked at cleaning up this by the lot line on Perkins Ridge Road, this looked like something that was a potential that we might talk about.
Folks who are familiar with that?
Johnson Hill Road down to Young's Corner, whatever that is right there, down to Garfield Road.
Right, yeah, along Perkins Ridge, I think, yeah, that must be, that must be what, Garfield Road you're crossing?
Yeah, Garfield, and then it changes to Hatch Road.
Yeah.
So I'm not I don't have any strong feeling one way or another. You know, several of those lots already have residential houses. Of the ones that would be in play there, 3 of the 4 have residential houses already in what would be the strip zone. The 4th one doesn't. I don't know why they stopped the strip zone there. The whole thing looks a little funky.
Allie, could you tell us what that hash line is?
That's the current ag zone boundary.
All of it, is that like a pink? I can't really tell. Is that what, like the lines through all the green there?
Yeah, those are the boundaries for the ag zone.
As opposed to low growth.
It's also in low growth.
Yeah, it's in low
Sorry,
growth.
it's in
But these are specifically ag.
Yes.
So I think the first question, should we square this up by the lot lines where this ends with this funny angle?
Well, yeah, why don't we answer that question first? Just kind of square those two lots. Good? Okay. Second question is extension of that strip zone further down to
Also noting that it's only on one side of Perkins Ridge Road that strip zone is there. The other side is probably because of the Taylor Pond.
yeah.
I think the other side's apple orchards.
Yeah, but it's dumping right into Taylor Pond, the watershed.
Yep, I think all this is
Yeah, this is
in
all
the Taylor Pond
watershed.
watershed.
Yep.
Yeah, could you put the watershed, the Taylor, there we go. I think you're on it.
It's on, it's just hard to see under. So this whole area in the light blue is the Taylor Pond.
And if you drive on that road, it very obviously dumps into the Taylor Pond because it's all a slope down to the streams and brooks.
Becky, did you have a question?
Yeah, can you just remind me the benefit or the purpose for a strip zone?
When you have really long lots, if you kind of have a goal to allow some form of development on the front part of that lot closest to the road and preserve kind of the back part for a less kind of dense or less intense use, to allow some more flexibility on the front side while preserving a larger piece in the back.
Right, that's what I thought. So to Jeff's point, connecting it down puts that benefit along the entirety of Perkins Ridge, correct?
Yes.
And Jeff also made the comment that there's some residential or buildings already along Perkins Ridge.
Yeah, I think there's 4 lots there. 3 of them have buildings along the road, residential structures. So this is 6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
Well, it sounds to me like we ought to develop a little stronger reasoning for wanting to change it as opposed to just because? Yeah?
Yeah, I guess I would say to me it makes sense to square it up with the lot there, and I don't really see any further benefit to extending it down below, mostly because that area is, I mean, I don't know how buildable any of it is anyway, where it's so close to, it's all swampy, but maybe there might be some benefit there. I know you've got, that's the gun range there, just below that. And then I think you have two more lots that are, that one of them has a house and one of them doesn't. So I'm not sure that there's really a huge opportunity here, but there might be.
I'm not hearing impassioned reasoning for doing that at this point. So I'd say let's square it off and let's leave the rest unless we change our mind. Oh,
Just a question. I'm wondering, the strip zone, I don't think it's coming off from Perkins Ridge. It seems to be coming off from Jackson Hill Road. And so the 450 feet come along the Jackson Hill Road, correct? It comes down
No,
into
the strip
that
zone's,
space.
no, it's on the west
Is it on
side.
is
It's
it
on the
on
west side of
Perkins
Perkins Ridge, yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't come down Jack.
Well, I think that's maybe, if you go up there, that's way more than 450 feet. My guess is that it's 450 feet or whatever, and they just came until they reached the house, because it's cut off right after the house. So you might as well just square it up to the lot.
Just trying to.
yeah.
And then add yellow to that very small triangle on the lot exactly to the north of it.
Want
Oh, yeah.
to move on?
Yeah. Thumbs up just to square it off there? Okay.
So the next one is another end of a strip zone. This one will be on Pownell Road. This one's really strange because it's stopped after a house, but the line actually goes across the street, doesn't reach the house, and it goes right through the garage. And, no, the other one, that's Trap Road, right here, zoom in on the end of that. So I wouldn't do the whole lot, but I would propose that those strip zone go across those lots to the lot lines. It make it a lot cleaner here than what this is.
Meaning go up or go down?
Go down.
To include those that are
But
partially
go from
covered.
there to that line, and then from there down to that line. And then they just follow the lot line down by the road.
Thank you.
Everybody good? Thumbs up? Okay.
Another one on Pownell by Tourmaline Drive. Yeah, it's right in there. So this is a little strange because the strip zone ran up Pownell Road, and just the way the projection went, it makes this little narrow strip on the back of this lot. And then when they came around the other side, so I would propose that little triangle there be made green. And then right above it, that little piece, the whole thing be made yellow. Because right now the line goes right through their house.
That's to encourage development of the garage.
Well, an ADU and an apartment at the top of the garage.
Sound good? Thumbs up? Okay.
And the last non-substantive one here is at Harmon's Corner. This is another one, just cleaning up with a lot line. So it would be just to the right of this. right here. So it cuts through those two, and I would propose that all of those two lots that are bifurcated now be yellow, and we just make it go along, follow the lot line.
Sound good? Thumbs up?
Thank you. I'll have a couple other, I think they're more substantive. I think other people probably have them on their list as well.
Yeah. So let's switch to the more substantive discussions. Let's see. So I think Washington Street, outer Washington Street, on the easterly side of outer Washington Street, where there was a change last time from green to red. So let's have the opportunity of some discussion on the merits of either keeping it red, keeping it green, or something else. Yeah, just a second, Jeff. Anyone other than Jeff have comments at this moment? Okay, if not, I'll defer to you, Jeff.
Yeah, so look, I think there's two issues here. I think it was Paul that or Dana that raised the issue about the piece that's way over, right, on the east side there. And, I think there's an argument could be made to bifurcate that lot and part of it on the east side be yellow. And then it begs the question, why below that, if you zoom in, there's a bunch of residential lots below that. It seems like those ought to be yellow. So you could run, the yellow, the 4 or 5 lots right there, you're covering them up. Go zoom out a little. Right there, those lots along the road, I mean, potentially you could make those yellow and then some portion of this large lot that's on Old Danville on one side here, yellow. I think there's a reasonable argument to be made for that, and I'll stop there because I have some other thoughts about the red that borders Washington Street.
And so I'm looking at the zoning map, and I know we're not talking about zoning, but there is a strip along that entire place that Jeff was just pointing out on both sides of the road. So it's zoned rural residential.
Current yellow right there is in the growth zone. It's where Moore Brickyard is. Of course, where this is because it's been there for years. And I think we need to think about what would happen if this wasn't Moore and Brick and they closed. Do you want somebody putting an iron foundry or a 32-bay Prompto oil change on this lot that's all surrounded by low? So I think that's why we changed it to yellow before. But after we changed it, I think there's, like I said, a good argument to be made to some of this where that strip is and part of that large parcel be yellow.
Discussion?
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense for that strip to exist. I mean, is that darker green right there? Is that the current zoning? Is that what that is?
Yeah, that's the rural residential zone.
Got it. Okay. And then are we discussing the high density parcels he had off Cameron Road? Okay. So I guess I'm just not sure what the goal is here to change that drastically from green to red.
So I think the goal, and this is why I think the right half of that could be yellow. It's not about Old Danville Road, it's about Washington Street corridor. So today, those first 4 lots are low density. The road there is an arterial. So there's a few things to think about here. For those of you that are familiar with DOT's road classification, right? You have 1, which is like the turnpike and the interstate and major arterials. And it goes down 2, 3, 4, and then you see all kinds of streets that don't have all these little side streets in Auburn. So in Auburn, other than the turnpike, the bridge coming across at Court Street, Union Street bypass, Turner, a very small section there, all the way up Route 4 to the Turner line, and all the way down Washington Street to Eastman are all Priority 1 roads. From Eastman, the very short piece that's maybe, I don't know, 3/4 a mile, half a mile or something from Eastman to the New Gloucester line is a Priority 2 road. To put this in context, Minot Avenue whole length of Minot Avenue is a Priority 2 road. So the traffic volume above Eastman is 20,000 cars a day. And the only place that you see that type of volume in Auburn is this Priority 1 road like Court, Union Street, Turner, and the very lower end of Center Street. So this is a major arterial that has very, very high traffic. It's located right next to the turnpike, and it has currently serviced by robust electrical utilities, and it's adjacent to current water and sewer, including a sewer pump station that the Auburn Sewer District's about to rebuild for $2.5 million. So if you're looking and saying, where are places that make sense to have high density to help meet some of these competing goals, this seems like a prime area to do that. And you know, there's other areas we can do this in, but when you start checking the boxes about what you need to service a high-density area, this has it already. And, you know, so if we wanted to take the area of those lots and say, we want to get that same density, but we want to do it in some place that's yellow or green, you need a land area 8 times the size of that. So I get it, it's not developed today, but long-term, given its adjacency to the turnpike and all the utilities and the traffic flow, this seems like a good area for future growth.
You know?
So I think the thing that, I think theoretically, I think I understand and I support that. I think it makes sense. The one thing that's holding me back, though, I think right now is that when I was on the council, there was a discussion with Chief Chase and how he was saying some additional development in West Auburn could potentially create a need for another fire station. And so I look at those parcels and, you know, there's significant acreage there. So if we move those into a high density, let's say they say they developed to the highest potential of form-based code. At that point, are we talking a new fire station? You know, that's the thing that I'm looking at. And maybe you guys could answer.
Well, two things I would say about that is perhaps, but we can make that same argument every place in the city. So we could say, we're going to get to land use categorization, and we're going to be talking about places in the red like Great Falls Plaza and the mall. And I've had this same discussion. The city manager and I were in a discussion with the chief and a bunch of other people, and they're talking about, well, should there be a cap on height? It's just a theoretical discussion, right? And of course, the chief has a very valid point. My ladder truck only goes so many floors. You know, you have to think about, is that going to constrain the future growth of the city, or do we just say if we get enough growth, we buy a new fire truck? If we get enough growth, we build a substation.
Jonathan?
One quick point to supplement the benefits of that area that I would note is that you've got double stack rail service abutting the eastern end of that lot, depending on sort of where you end up on the zoning. But as I've looked at that area, and we'd had some internal conversations as well about that area with the infrastructure, there are significant environmental, you could call them constraints, you could call them resources to protect and steward. The extent to which you have that whole lot to plan for, your ability to use portions of the lot to achieve density in lieu of being away from those resources, in particular the northern end of the Royal River watershed, that's where the zoning piece comes in later, but having that whole lot available, you can plan for the density against the overall lot size and then protect the natural resource on the other side. And that will be a significant limiting factor for most of those lots west of Danville Junction.
Okay, thank you. Bill?
Yeah, I think I think the mayor makes a good point. It could be, right? It could, but it's several different elements that will be part of that tipping point to determine whether or not you need to have that additional service growth in that area. The fact that this is right off from Washington Street is an area where when we evaluated, and I think, Dana, I think you were on the council at the time, when we took a look at Mountain View, there was a lot of development that had happened in up around that area, had some substantial growth. We looked at police call volume, fire call volume, really dissected all the calls that were in there. And of all that growth, nothing even came close to increasing our call volume in any significant way. As was just mentioned, the density here could definitely increase a potential type of use for calls, but the fact that it's right off from Washington Street really lessens the impact of what we would look at as we look at a radius of where the response time is from one of the station houses. That's not you're not going to see a significant change right off from Washington Street.
Okay, I'm okay with it being red.
Well,
I had mentioned those properties, not that I was totally in the know of what you guys are talking about, but I knew just hearing public comment and stuff about preserving or conserving open space and resources and things like that. That stuff needs to come out, knowing that we also took a lot of other ag zone area out of the growth zone, sort of this, where should we give or not, or take for that matter. And just making sure that all of that stuff comes out to know that this is important here.
yeah, that's a challenge, all the competing elements. Any further comment? Is it the pleasure of the board to keep it in red? Thumbs up for that? Okay.
And did we land on updating these to yellow, these residential properties?
Oh, yes, yeah.
And are we going to continue that yellow all the way along there? In other words,
Yeah,
the
I was
red
gonna
not
ask that.
extending to Old Danville Road, it will transition to yellow before we get to the street?
Those changes acceptable? Thumbs up? Okay. Did I miss anything? Nope, doing good. Hallie, you're set?
Yes.
Okay. Southeast side of Route 202, is that what we've been discussing here? I think that's similar to Washington Street. Okay, I've got that and that. Jane, we've talked about land use categories and had discussions about that. Are there other significant changes that you want to talk about this evening? Jeff?
John, I have one more. I'm happy to defer if somebody else wants to have something on their list, but if we can go up, I think that somewhere along the way here, this got lost. South of the lake, north of Grace Lawn Road, in the pit area. So there's been lots of discussion about this to your left. That area that's outside of the watershed, that now is not low growth. And I think that got flipped back to green when we were talking about the park and stuff across the street, but I question the piece that's outside the watershed, that should be low growth. It should certainly be yellow, and I think there's an argument to be made, given what else is right there, that it should be red.
Is it this parcel right here?
Yeah, and there's lots of challenges. It would be from the split where the red ends to the left. It would be all those parcels across there, and we don't need to go through all the details tonight, but there's lots of challenges there, right? Because there's an old landfill and, you know, parts of that you're not going to be able to develop on. But the discussions over the last few years have not led this, at the current moment we're in, to be a low growth area.
So these were updated to green because the back corners touch the watershed based on our last meeting. Updates were made to extend to the parcel boundary so we can.
Well, yeah, I mean, we can talk about it. I think there's lots of different perspectives on this, but it would be similar to the backside of the Central Maine College lot just above that, which is red to the demarcation of the watershed overlay district.
So would you make all of the green north of the street, but south of the watershed, would you make that red or would you make it yellow?
Well, today, the way it is today, it would, with the changes that were finalized, we haven't really discussed this for a couple of years, but this was kind of resolved a couple of years ago, and what's there today would, depending on the land use categories, would certainly all be yellow. Some of it would certainly be red, and it might all be red depending on the land use categorization.
Can you remind me what's on those lots right now, or what's the use of those lots?
So this red hatch is the ag zone. And then, do you know what the zoning of that is? This is suburban residential on the right.
That's St. Dom's.
Part of this is general business.
So the lot where that mustard color is, the backside of that lot would be multifamily suburban, and that's general business. That's all the sand pit. And then as Dana pointed out, the kind of grayish one is St. Dom's, and the one in between the city owns, and that's where the landfill and there's materials dump and stuff that the Public Works uses.
And it's also multifamily suburban, which allows quite a bit of density, and also general business, which with state legislation, we would have to require residential and commercial areas. So I think to Jeff's point, it's interesting that it's in green, given its current zoning designation.
Red.
Well, I'm sorry, including the dump space?
Well, that's not going to get developed, but if we want to pick it apart like that, that's fine.
Yeah, I think this gets back to the whole question about all through the red. What do you do about parks and conserved land and shoreland zoning and all that? You deal with it differently other than a growth zone categorization.
And the line, the back lot, squirrely line is the watershed line? Yeah.
Yes.
All right. What are some thoughts on this?
So just to be clear, this representation that's up here right now of the watershed boundary, I don't believe is correct.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the city GIS, and I think it more properly follows the demarcation of the hatched lines, which is ag zone. So if we make this, right, if you go over to the city GIS and put that up, you'll get a much better perspective of what this looks like.
Yeah, I think if you look at the Maine Drinking Water Program line that came back from them, that's what you'll see the change on this. And you're right, it should show up in that GIS.
While that's getting pulled up, John, my thought is, certainly the watershed or demarcation we're just talking about takes precedent, but beyond that, I like the recommendation Paul just put forth that the other lots, those portions outside of that, should be read.
So the watershed would be probably on the multifamily suburban line, right?
Yeah, so you can see here.
That's what we did.
The bright green is the multifamily suburban, and that's part of where the sand pit is, and the orange is a piece in the front that borders Grace Lawn Road. So the watershed's actually much closer to Grace Lawn Road than in the other presentation we were looking at.
Tim, you think should be read? Everything south of the watershed line.
That's correct.
Are you any good with that?
That's St. Dom's. It does, the back side of it's the watershed boundary. It is.
That's been set by the state Department of Health and Human Services, their water division. All right, so are we ready? All those put your thumb up if you're in favor of making it red. Okay.
And just for our records, we're talking about this area here as well as this SR
Correct.
zone. Okay, perfect.
And anybody who wants to think they built
John,
on
I'm
a
sad to
land
report
plan.
that I'm out of ideas.
Yeah. You're out of ideas?
Amen. Oh,
All right. Any other areas before we switch to Jonathan? Is that a good way to go? That good? Yeah, okay. Okay, so let's have Jonathan help us understand the airport area of influence and how that affects the future land use map.
I did print a couple of maps that I could talk to, and the folks from Barry Dunn have the latest shape files for the airport area of influence. As I mentioned at the intros, Jonathan Labonte, Transportation Director for the city. Part of that role, the city contract manages the Auburn Lewiston Municipal Airport now. I think this is probably the deepest the airport has been in talking about land use planning with the city. Been fortunate over the last few months for the councilors here and planning board members have gotten some exposure to the federal obligations that come with land use planning around airports. And that is not just the land owned by the airport, where we just went through some zoning changes, but the area that's influenced by arrivals and departures into the airport. I think unless you have a reason to be heading out, say, Lewiston Junction Road, and see activity, say, on a summer afternoon when the ramp's full of, 24+ jets, I think folks may be out of sight, out of mind that we have a regional reliever airport, which is now, in terms of based aircraft, the 12th largest in New England. A lot has changed out there just in the last couple of years in terms of activity, but the base infrastructure is fairly significant. So that first page that shows a bunch of circles and trapezoids and triangles, that is the airport area of influence. So that is the airspace in 3 dimensions that the city, by taking grants from the FAA, along with Lewiston, but Auburn holds the land use controls here on the west side of the river. That's the airspace to be protected to ensure safe operations for the type of aircraft that come in and out of the airport. It's not just Cessna 172s, it's Gulfstream 500s, so it ranges in size. I didn't print the supporting exhibit that's just to the south, so that area of influence extends into New Gloucester. We don't have land use capabilities in New Gloucester. The airport does own a little bit of land there from some old navigational aids that were in New Gloucester, but it gives you sort of a grand sense. Does that mean that anything within sort of that racetrack area inbound, the city should be, greatly restricting heights or prohibiting residential development? No, but I wanted to first give you sort of a sense of scale in terms of the airport's influence. You can actually see some color shaded areas that some of it head up to sort of Mountain View, where you see those areas numbers. Those are actually trees at elevation that are penetrating those surfaces that we're charged to protect from the FAA. Are those high priority trees to go at and top? No. The real sort of cornerstone interest, foundational interest that I wanted to highlight for you folks tonight are those sort of core approach areas as you come in on Hotel Road from the north or the south, as you come in from Kitty Hawk, or as you come in from West Hardscrabble and Lewiston Junction Road. If you go to the next page, so I mentioned federal obligations. So there's a Grant Assurance 21, and I'm happy to circulate some of the memos that I had drafted for the council and planning board that kind of talk about the specific language around non-compatible land use. That's the word that the federal government uses. So that anything that's residential or outdoor mass gathering for sort of a permanent use are considered non-compatible. And then when you start to get into certain heights, especially if those heights are penetrating those approach surfaces or could obstruct a navigational aid that's helping pilots, especially those non-visual flight rules arrivals that it's really critical for us to be able to manage, whether it's vegetation or buildings, can have a significant negative influence, and those negative influences can lead us to have an adjustment in the minimums for aircraft coming in, which means we limit the conditions by which aircraft can come to our airport, which either has them not come in at all or they shift to other facilities, which would obviously have an impact on economic development. So that color-coded map, this was not created by Barry Dunn. It is called the Airport Land Use and RPZ, that's Runway Protection Zone Control Plan. So once you get really in close to the airport, the FAA wants the airport, as in the city, to have full control of those areas. It can do it through fee ownership, it can do it through easements. In some ways, indirectly, it can do some of that with zoning, with land use controls. So the green areas are airport owned and industrial. You see some blue areas there where we have some additional industrial. Some of the hatch marks are easements. But what I want to point out is the areas in purple on the east side of Hotel Road. So you'd have to kind of turn the map on the side, and maybe coming northeast of Hotel Road towards Martindale. Those areas right now are zoned residential. Those areas right now on the growth area maps are seen as high growth. Where the challenge comes in is not necessarily that there's residential zoning on the east side of the airport and on the north side of the airport, given the current density. But what state law brings to bear in terms of density and heights would likely introduce some challenges for the future of this facility if the potential of that zoning and that high growth designation were then accomplished by property owners or developers in those areas. Without knowing that the municipal zoning can't then overcome what that state law provides. So the risk of having high density residential on the approach to or departure end of runway 35, which is our crosswind runway, which for most of the medium to small aircraft is a critical access point when we have crosswinds on runway 422. We have what they call a left hand circulation around the airport. So aircraft take off and they turn left to depart, but that also means they're turning left to come in to approach. We do have a beacon light at Martindale, because of the grades there, and we're likely to be working on some vegetation issues. But if we see the expansion of residential high density and then height in those areas, that will have an impact on the airport, both in terms of what it might mean for approach procedures or limitations that the FAA might place, but it will also create some quality of life challenges for those who are then living in the pattern. So there's the piece of the black and white, cold, calculated, we've got this asset to protect, so we should do things to protect this asset because of what it can do for community economic development. On the other side, there's folks who, if high density, high height facilities get built, what you then build in for residents who will then have quality of life challenges or concerns with hearing aircraft at not necessarily all hours, but early morning flight school lessons or UPS flights through, life flight approaches in the middle of the night, responding to incidents. I don't come necessarily with a solution because I would not propose or recommend that the city say, well, where there's existing housing along Hotel Road, that should be zoned industrial and all that's non-conforming. But I think if you're looking for areas where you might think maybe near term it's yellow to create some better control over the density and height, given the state law implications until we can find another solution. Some of those areas around the inner approach and departures for the 4 runways may be worth considering to be a different color other than red, just as a near-term protection. I've had some conversation with Lauren and staff, haven't had a chance to talk with the mayor, though I know the city's been active in some of the legislative efforts to think about changes. There are 35 public use airports in the state. There's likely a very logical carve out to ensure that municipalities have the ability to meet their federal obligations to manage for certain land uses around airports. But given the momentum that we've been building at that facility, I think there is some significant concern about high density in those areas. Constellation Drive is probably a perfect example where we have single family lots that jet right into sort of the main airport, and envisioning that if we were to have high density and higher height facilities built for residential, the impact that could have. The last thing I'll point out, I'm happy to kind of answer questions. There's a yellow sort of blob that follows for the most parts the runway. The last time we did a noise study, looking at sort of decibels and at what decibels you might get to the FAA saying, now we'll evaluate for potential mitigation measures. Mitigation could be replacing windows and adding insulation. It could be acquisition and demolition. If you're inside of that yellow, that 65 decibel, that's an area where the FAA would say if you likely would or could ask the FAA to participate in a noise study to evaluate mitigation. We don't see those areas right now extending well into development areas. You see some of it towards the Kitty Hawk, the Sassaville apartment development there on First Flight. But obviously, you can imagine over time as the airport grows, if we're successful in expanding business aviation opportunities, as folks come to look at investing in Auburn, you could see both the 1735 area, that crosswind runway, as well as 422. 4 is not as much of an issue. The airport pretty much controls everything it would need to out to Poland Spring Road on the other side of the quarry. But that north side coming up into Fletcher Road, Hotel Road, Martindale Road could become challenges. So, again, I don't necessarily have a solution. There's a lot of layers at this. The state law creates significant, obviously, implications to those high growth areas because the density is out of the city's control if it's high growth, a little more in the city's control in the moderate growth. But wanted to bring that before the group and would be happy to answer questions or provide any other as.
So, Jonathan, so I understand, perhaps others as well. Is there an issue with commercial industrial? Does that cause problems for the federal government as opposed to residential?
The industrial commercial is ideal because you're generating economic activity. The airport's going to be pursuing some of that on land it owns in partnership with the city to generate revenue. Heights become a challenge. There are a number of industrial users where protection of the airspace, but for the most part, the industrial lots, the airport holds navigation easements, so we can work with those property owners to manage heights up to the city's max in the industrial zone. There are some challenges where the airport's airspace protection forces allowed land use to below what zoning would allow. So some industrial users are actually losing access to airspace to develop their lots, which might be something that would be worth discussing separately. The residential is the real challenge because you're introducing those quality of life challenges that over time have been proven nationally to impact sustaining airports over time. So we're fortunate that this is a fairly well protected area, but that high growth area with the residential, with the state law bonuses, I think really create a significant risk on that east side in particular.
So could we address some of those issues that may be conflicts or quality of life issues through our categories that we set up, saying, what in this particular area perhaps you may be high growth, but it might be industrial.
If it's high growth industrial, you won't find any concerns with respect to the airport or the city's sort of intermodal as it relates to rail frontage. That the issue is where you have the high growth in the residential or the high growth in general business, because general business allows you to take that advantage of that same residential density. There aren't a lot of those commercially zoned parcels. You get some of that on the outer end of the runway 35 approach when you get into Harriman Drive and Adamian Drive. The challenge, the airspace isn't as much of a challenge once you get on the other side of the turnpike. So there's some pending residential development that's already been approved that it's not ideal, but I've seen significantly worse elsewhere. It's just those areas where you literally have residential properties inside of the airport, right in those areas abutting where aircraft would be operating, where you'd get those bonuses from the state because it's residentially zoned and it's high growth and it has water and sewer.
Am I remembering correctly that the state law, if it's industrial, doesn't insist that you allow residential in that area?
But there's hundreds of acres of residentially zoned property all along the airport's east side. Yep.
Yeah, I understand.
I'm not talking about airport-owned property. I'm talking about privately owned property zoned residential. Yep.
What I'm trying to address here is how do we deal with this? So if we had the opportunity for land use categories, which we haven't gotten to yet,
yep.
We can describe those areas in a way that would limit height, for example, that could prioritize industrial kind of use in areas. And we could take a look at, the density issue, think about it for a minute here. But I hear your point about residential. In fact, I hear the planes going over my house, and I'm nowhere near the airport on Davis Avenue. They zip right over my house, bringing the mail or whatever they're doing. So it's even areas beyond what you have here, you know, that jets can be heard coming in. But I hear your point, and I'm trying to figure out, in our process, maybe we need to think about ways that we can address that.
I'll defer to the committee to make recommendations, but the airport would be on record not suggesting changing any of the current residential zones to an industrial. I think you've got long-standing neighborhoods that have been on that east side since the interurban ran behind them. I think it becomes a matter of, if you had the ability to say, could we do some yellow strips in areas, in key areas, to go from high growth to the moderate growth, you at least step down some of what the state would impose upon you, and then maybe there's a broader discussion around state policy towards public use airports that would give, you know, the mayor and the council greater flexibility in future years.
You know, I wasn't suggesting that we make well-developed residential areas industrial. I think I know what the response would be, and I'd rather not be on the receiving end of it. I'd be happy if you were, but I'm not interested in it. But at the same time, there are, and we have an industrial use in a fair amount of areas around the airport. So certainly what we've been doing ought to probably be continued in that area. Then the next thing is what other tools do we have to try to deal with primarily residential issues? Jeff?
Yeah, a few thoughts on this. So I think we want to be very careful about this because you have to think about this in context of the recent legislative changes. There's very, very little difference between, on our map, red and yellow in a residential zone if it's served by water and sewer, right? It's slightly less dense, but in neither case does it inform you anything about the height of the building. There's none of these requirements say anything about height other than you're allowed by state statute for certain qualifying affordable housing, either an additional story or 14 feet, however you're doing this. We do it by stories, but some cities do it by the number of feet. I think you're also going to want to be very careful you don't start laying down yellow around here and hem yourself in from an economic development standpoint. My thoughts about this is that a potential approach would be to leave this red. We'll work through our land use categories. I don't think you want to create subcategories for the AOI. In other words, I don't think you want to say in red or in yellow, whatever we're going to do, we have certain residential categories, but we're going to have residential AOI. I think the way to handle this is through an overlay, and we say whether it's high growth, medium growth, whatever it is, we define the types of restrictions that the airport needs to sustain their operations in an overlay district that would lay on top of this, right? So let's say, you know, my reading of the state regulations and the recent legislative changes say nothing about dimensional regulations in any way. It doesn't say anything about setbacks. It doesn't say anything about building heights, building size. I've talked to staff about this, and we have I don't know that we know an answer yet. Is that fair to say, Lauren? But we're noodling around with this to make sure we understand the relationship between dimensional regulations and you know, the state's density requirements. The way I understand it right now is we can have whatever dimensional regulations we need. So I think a better approach might be to categorize what the airport needs for restrictions to facilitate good airport operations and minimize impacts on the surrounding area. And we define that in an overlay district that sits on top of the growth zones, the land use characteristics that we come up with, zoning, whatever. So regardless of what growth zone we're in or what zoning we're in, we can maintain the appropriate regulations for the AOI.
Would it be useful if Barry Dunn and Lauren took a look at these issues, probably with a conversation continuing with Jonathan, because we're going to have to address this somehow, and perhaps if you took a look at it and made some suggestions on how we might approach it, that would help our process.
We can work with city staff on that and provide also some examples of other communities that have airport overlays and examples of comp plans that have overlays on top of land use categories and growth areas.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing this to our attention. This is the time to do it. And let's see what we can find for options and solutions to address it.
I would say one other thing, John, you know, if we need exemptions from some of these new housing changes, we should think about that. We ran into this same thing in the Lake Auburn Watershed Overlay District, and the city approached the legislature, and we got certain exemptions from some of the new housing laws because of the drinking water protection, and I think you could make a similar type of argument relative to the airport.
Yeah. No, I you know, not going to happen in this legislative session, but this process is going to go on for a while. So if we find looking for an exceptions is helpful, and identify other airports that would have similar interests, they may be our allies in this. And, and a good way to avoid problems is don't put people in that are going to be opposed to this. If they want to do their own thing, keep them out of the exemption. Let them do their thing. Just do yours. That's what I told them about the Lake Auburn watershed when they started. Oh no, it had to be every drinking water thing in the state. And I said, you're going to generate a bunch of opposition for nothing. Sure did. Suggested, how about just Lake Auburn, since that's where our problem is? Slipped right through.
There you go.
Most legislators don't live in the area, don't going to spend any time on it. Just from a guy who fought a few battles up there. Anything else from the committee? No? Thank you, Jonathan. We'll let you get home to your family. So that brings us to sub-item II. Maybe have a little summary of discussions that occurred with natural resource management from the SNRB.
I think we've addressed the substantial comments from the SNRB, and I'm going to hold off on, thank you, some other comments that might come up in land use categories from them as well. So I'm going to hold off. I think there was interest in, I'll just say briefly, looking at the Little Androscoggin River and other bodies of water and potentially mapping shoreline zoning and FEMA flood zones as a potential land use category of, you know, highlighting these natural resources. So working through other solutions of that. Because there are practical limitations to, if you look on the red, the Little Androscoggin is in the red, but there's limitations of, like I said, shoreline zoning and FEMA that we could clearly and more and in a better way map them so people know that they're not going to develop right on the Little Androscoggin. But I think the other comments were addressed for the time being.
Okay, and as we refine more of our work here, it certainly can get back and share that with committees of interest. All right, so land use categories. We got a half an hour. We don't want to waste that. So we'll move into land use categories. So, Ally, how do you want to proceed with that, given that we have, well, unless you want to stay past 9, but about a half an hour.
I think we can kind of set the stage for what we're going to be asking of the committee at this meeting. We have some worksheets here and talk through that, and then use the full meeting on the 19th to discuss land use categories more in depth and give you all time to prepare some thoughts around this.
So I think originally we had the 19th as our land use categories meeting. It's from 6 to 8 p.m. We're thinking of extending that from 6 to 9 p.m. since we didn't get our discussion in this evening. So, John, did you hear that comment that I just made about extending our March 19th meeting? Currently, it's scheduled from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. But since we didn't have a substantial discussion on land use categories tonight, I'm wondering if we can extend that meeting from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. So another 3-hour.
On the 19th.
Mm-hmm.
I bring my sleeping bag.
I already
here,
put it
so
in my
it's fine
calendar
with
that
me.
way, so I guess I'm good with it.
Yeah, it's there. If yeah.
Is that, you want to add another hour to our 19th and give us a chance to do it more?
I'll let you out 15 minutes early
Yeah.
tonight.
Yeah, well, if that's the pleasure of the committee, I'm not opposed. Okay, we'll do that.
Okay.
So what we'd be looking at for that meeting, we have a cheat sheet in front of you that has some general building blocks of what goes into a land use category. And Jane, I have a bit of a better answer to your earlier question. When we're thinking about land use categories, we're thinking about the types of places that exist, not necessarily neighborhood by neighborhood, but kind of suburban residential style development as its own land use category. Rural residential is kind of its own piece there, for example. So what we would like to do at the next meeting is start with the low growth area, and identify from this committee the types of land uses and land use categories that the committee would like to see in that area, move into the moderate growth area, and then the high growth area. So thinking through the building blocks that are in the worksheets in front of you, the general types of places that you would like to see reflected and what attributes those have within them.
I think what would make our March 19th meeting most efficient and fruitful is if, for homework, the committee could take the green, I'm reiterating what Ally said, take the green and take the building blocks of a land use category and basically fill out what you'd imagine that area to be or what the vision for that area would be in the future, and do that for each of the growth areas. So there can be multiple land use categories within a given growth area, as we've discussed. So that way, at the March 19th meeting, we can start off the meeting with your feedback and your comments. If you get them to us earlier, that's more fantastic. But we have a starting point, and so we can have a robust discussion through those 3 hours rather than coming to the meeting with more of a blank slate. So that is the charge, I think, to this committee for that meeting on the 19th.
That's a good suggestion, and probably there are two ways you might approach that homework. One would be desktop. You have these maps that you can manipulate and zoom in, zoom out, look at the streets, look what's around there. So you could do tests. If it's a long snowy day, there might be a good activity. And later you could make some brownies. Now, the other way to do it is you might just go out, as was suggested by one of our public folks, take a drive out to areas you may not have been to in a while and refresh your memory what that actually looks like. Then you could go out to dinner later. It's what I used to do when I was dating my wife, and she still married me.
So by the end of this week, Barry Dunn should implement the changes that we discussed today. So then you'll be given a new map to make the land use categories. And I'll add a third option to John's 2 options. You can also request a printed map from me, and I can do different scales and print 11 by 17 and so on. So you can just send me an email and
Yeah.
I can get those printed for you if you prefer. I like paper, so it's a little bit easier to comment on. And we'll have a kind of a template to work off of as well.
Yep, another option. All right, so plan your schedules. The 19th is not as far away as you think. Anything else? Just, of course, you know we're having a meeting on the 19th and the 24th. 19th will be 6 to 9, and the 24th will be 6 to 9 as well. Anything else? We're done? Adjourn? Motion to adjourn, seconded, all in favor? Yay.
Thank you.